Okay, we are going to get started with the webinar, and welcome to the ongoing series sponsored by Results to Strategy. And just to remind everyone, you can ask questions throughout the webinar. You'll see them chat function on your screen there to the right of the presentation. And so feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll interrupt and ask the presenters things as they need to. If not, we'll wait to the end of it and give people more opportunity. And as a reminder, we will be making a link possible to all of you so that you can watch the webinar at your leisure or share it with other people in your organization. So I'd like to get started by just introducing myself first. My name is Fred LaFranc. I'm the founder and chief operating officer of Results Through Strategy. I also go by the title of Chaos Strategist because we deal with a disruptive world. And I'm very excited and welcoming our following panelists. I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, give you a brief background of who they are and what they do, and then we'll get started with the content. So Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for asking us to participate today. My name is Adam Leff, and I am the co-founder of Merchant Centric along with David Bay. Merchant Centric works with brands representing over 10,000 locations across the country. We help them connect with their guests to drive more revenue. Prior to Merchant Centric, David and I were part of the management team at Realtor.com, helping that grow to be the #1 real estate website.
Thank you, Adam. Connie?
Yes, thank you for having us on the call, Fred. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategic and National Accounts at Merchant Centric. I'm working with national brands in multiple verticals, but restaurant industry is really my point of emphasis. And my passion is really helping our clients to capture market share by listening to their guests, to understand what is important to them and to help them drive revenue. I've always considered it a real honor when our clients have invited me to be a keynote speaker and share with their franchisees and their teams the importance of online engagement and really connecting with their guests in order to drive revenue.
All right, and then representing some of the operators who are going to be part of the discussion today is Katie Milligan from Firehouse Subs. Katie, if you can introduce yourself, please.
I can. Thanks, Fred. So I'm Katie Milligan. I am the manager of guest services for Firehouse Subs. A little overview of what I oversee currently is our in-house call center, as well as social media platforms and all of our review sites. Background on myself, I've been with the brand for 6 years now. I started as an hourly crew member, worked my way up through the ranks in the restaurant, eventually led one of our company-owned restaurants, and then 3 years ago transitioned into HQ as a solo customer service representative, and now I have a team of 3 to help me with those duties that we have.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. And lastly, a friend of mine, the CEO of 2J's Deli, Chris Artinian.
Thanks, Fred, and everyone. So Chris Artinian, I'm currently the president and CEO of 2J's Deli Bakery Restaurant. I've been in the restaurant industry over 25 years, basically all of my adult life. 17 years at Morton's in the fine dining steakhouse space. There I started as a pantry cook and ended up the CEO. It was a nice run, and since then have worked with in the casual dining space with Smoky Bones for a few years, putting together a growth strategy, and currently with 2J's as we build our growth strategy here. And it's a 36-year-old local brand in Florida, 27 locations in full service casual dining as well. And I also sit on a couple of restaurant boards. So restaurants is what I do.
Fantastic. Thank you. So you can see by the agenda on the screen, we're going to get a lot into the technology space, but social media, has been growing in importance and significance in the restaurant industry for the last few years. Ironically, there's still a lot of confusion around it. And there's confusion because there's a diverse set of apps and sites where people make feedback and comment, from Yelp to Facebook and Google and all points in between. And it's difficult to aggregate the information to understand what's happening to restaurants. The other aspect of it is, what do you do about it? And can you use it as a strategic tool to not just engage your guests, but also to increase revenues in your restaurants? And the answer to those questions is yes, and that's what we're going to explore. So those of you who are fortunate enough to be in the call, you're going to be able to learn some very specific hands-on, fact-based, action-oriented things that you can do in your business to help grow your revenue, but at the same time further engage your guests, because we're in a very disruptive time in the industry. There's a lot of competition out there, and what I'll say to you emphatically in our experience is that the brands that have the best engagement and relationship with their guests are the ones that are going to be successful today and into the future. So as you can see, we're going to go over understanding the technology space. We're going to talk a lot about online guest engagement management. Also, under the value of what our guests say and how to take action on it, as I mentioned earlier. So what are the actions that people can take? And then lastly, online guest engagement management checklist, just to review what we talked about. So let's get started right in the middle of it. So Adam, give us some commentary on this.
Sure, Fred, thank you. So as you said, our goal is to sort of help folks understand restaurant technology available. And so I thought we would throw up a word cloud of many of the buzzwords that we're hearing. And obviously, this is really not helpful for an understanding. Clouds may be good for computing, but not good for really organizing what's going on. And so what we want to do is actually translate this into something that's easier for us to understand. And we've put together a quadrant analysis. Our goal here is to give the listeners an idea of thinking about all the different types of technology and sort of what areas they fall into. And so if you look at the axis we have here, we're dividing technology on the x-axis between impersonal connections and personal connections, and then on the y-axis from just presenting information to them to actually in-person, face-to-face action. So the first area of technology that's out there that I'm sure everybody is familiar with is online media. These are your websites, your business listings on popular websites like Google, Yelp, Facebook, Foursquare, what have you, the social media. There's a lot of technology, valuable technology around that that's helping restaurants today. The second quadrant below that, where you actually go from sort of an impersonal connection to some level of action, is targeted advertising. And there's lots of valuable companies helping restaurants target the people who may be coming to their listings and being able to drive them into their restaurants. So lots of value being driven here as well. Then in the upper right-hand quadrant, where you start to get more into actual personal connections around the information or the experiences people are having, is the area we're going to dig into, which is online guest engagement management. And these are the ratings. This is where you actually have your guests making comments about your restaurants, about their experience, taking surveys, and giving you data that you can analyze such that you can actually understand better what they're saying about the last quadrant, which is the in-store experience. That's in the bottom right. And in the in-store experience is obviously where you have the greatest personal connection. It's face-to-face. There's actions in terms of what the offering you're providing. And that's ultimately where you build your brand most strongly. But all of these other areas are great opportunities to extend your brand. We're going to dig deeper into the online guest engagement management.
So the thing to keep in mind is that one of the phenomena that's happened nowadays is the era of the formal, all-powerful critic is dead. People no longer look to restaurant critics or even movie critics to tell them what to see, where to eat. They're really looking for their friends, and they're doing it in social media. So your guest experience does not end when people leave your restaurant. What happens is they go home or on their phone or on their way home, they get on their phones, their smartphones or their laptops, and start tweeting. They start writing things on Facebook, commentaries, what they did for the evening, and then there's a whole societal engagement around validating where people chose. And so I'm going to ask Connie to just explain what the 4 ways that you can use for guest management solutions.
Well, Fred, it's interesting that you say that because a new study just was released by Bright Local from last year's survey saying that 84% of people trust online reviews as much as their personal recommendations out there. So it is very important. They are listening to what people are saying online and across the nation. So it is a top importance for us.
And Fred, the point you're making here on this slide with the different solutions kind of are the different stages in terms of how brands are choosing to engage with guests. So if we look at the first solution, you have reputation monitoring solutions. And this is where they may be alerting or able to look at what their guests are saying. As Connie mentioned, more and more of those guests are putting their feedback on websites like Facebook and Yelp and Google and TripAdvisor. And so table stakes today is reputation monitoring. You have to at least listen to what's going on. And if you don't, you're at risk of having information out there that's affecting your brand, and you're not really understanding what's going on, why that's happening. The next solution is really reputation management. This is where you take make the investment to actually engage with those guests. Many times your customer may actually say things in your store to a restaurant manager, and you would never accept the manager not replying to them, and yet there are brands out there with thousands and tens of thousands of guest comments that are unreplied to. So being able to address them is really important. It can also help you in times of crises. We've seen examples where brands have actually had food contaminations and not been able to address it. So you need to have control of that. So that's reputation management. The next step beyond reputation management is an important one, because that's beyond actually the engagement. That's really the analyzing and understanding what your guests are saying. In data analytics, you're able to begin to strategize and say, if we take these actions, we'll be able to better serve our customer and be able to improve revenues. So that's where you can actually decide what you're going to implement. And then you need a system that actually provides you reporting and have dashboards to be able to track it, because if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, you can't communicate to your ranks what you're trying to accomplish, they won't see any benefit.
And one thing I would like to add to this is that we're attending all of these conferences, and people are talking to the market about how to listen to their guests, and they're feeling that they are engaging because they have Facebook pages and they do Facebook posts, and in their mind, because they've done a Facebook post, they're engaging back and forth on that. They maybe do an Instagram. In their mind, they're doing social engagement, and yet they're missing these important guests that are talking to them on Google, Yelp, and TripAdvisor. In some cases, many of these businesses haven't even claimed or set up a page on TripAdvisor where their guests are trying to talk to them.
So this slide here are demonstrating some of the results that we're seeing from businesses that are actually engaging in online guest engagement management. They're measuring it, and they're able to see that they're getting more new and repeat guests. And another crucial benefit, and we often get asked by brands, is how do I get more reviews? And the best organic way of getting more reviews we've seen, and it happens again and again, is when you actually engage with them. When you engage with your guests, you will see that they actually recognize that this is a way to communicate, because they want to communicate with you, and you're going to get more reviews. And typically, you're getting more positive reviews. We've done this with many brands, and they'll see that their review velocity increases anywhere up to 4 times, and they will also see the number of 4 and 5 stars dramatically increase, and all this leads to increased revenue. So these are some of the great benefits of online guest engagement management.
Great, thank you. So let's get on to talking about how this can actually, help you increase sales, which is probably of great interest to people on the call, given the state of the industry right now. Adam?
Yes, so this is actually digging in. I mean, the review content is unstructured review content. So people are just, saying off the top of their head, what their experience was. And this is really valuable, because in order for them to motivate to actually log in and say something about your brand, they've had to have something really strong happen. And so the challenge is to take this unstructured content and divide it into the areas of product, service, staff, surroundings, and price value. But you can see these are some comments, real comments with regard to product. A new burger, it lacks flavor. With regard to service, they may have felt rushed, so they're talking about timeliness. They could be talking about order accuracy. With staff, they can be talking about product knowledge. They didn't know the menu, whether there was commitment, or whether they had a really enjoyable experience, and if staff members made it really outstanding. You can look at surroundings. It's not always the bathrooms are an issue. It's often about noisiness and whether the dirt was in the tables or the experience of the comfort in the tables. But also they can talk specifically about best parts of the surroundings. And then finally, you'll get a lot of feedback in terms of whether the value was there, and whether it was good for the price or whether it was not. So these are important things that you can measure and track over time. And this is where your guests are really telling you what is most important that you need to focus on. It's important. It can be a challenge, though, to discern what's most important from what is loudest. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we hear when we're talking to brands, when they get so much content, so much feedback. So we can take a look next at how are guests sharing.
Well, we're going to get into now is just to show you sort of the process by which we're able to collect the data and have you take action on it. So go ahead, Adam.
So, we look at where are the guests, posting their comments. What are the websites? I'd ask some of our operators, Chris, do you have an idea of some of the sites that have been important for 2Js?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, Yelp is quite important, but TripAdvisor is one of those. Well, let me take a step back. First of all, we get feedback across, all those channels. We do see a lot of TripAdvisor. Being in Florida, we a lot of tourists or seasonal type guests among everything else. But we certainly see it across all the channels that are presented here.
So we know that the guests are going to these different websites and sharing their opinions. And then when we look at, where is it? Are they leaving it at a sort of high brand level, a single Facebook page for the entire brand? Or are they looking at the location level? Katie, do you have some experience with this?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, for Firehouse Subs, we're split with corporate and franchise-owned locations. And we actually monitor and respond to all of those, no matter who owns it. And the majority of the reviews are at the location level. So what we'll do is we'll acknowledge the guests, apologize, let them know that we're then sending that to the management to then address at the local restaurant level. Then anything that is a brand review or, a brand issue, we will personally take ownership of that, and then if it needs to go to a certain department, whether it be R&D, product quality, marketing, we'll do that, and we'll send that feedback to those departments so that way we can take action on those reviews.
You said something else, Katie, that was a great point, and that is that as a brand with over 1,000 locations, you've made the investment to actually have a team there centrally looking at it and monitoring it across all your locations. And Fred has often pointed out to me, hey, social media is supposed to be free. It's not free. There's actually an investment here. There are other brands that we work with that actually, they know this is really important, but they don't have the staff. And so, there are other ways of working with that type of opportunity. Merchant Centric is working with lots of brands to actually connect them with their guests so they're not ignoring what's being said out there. And it can be a challenge when you're getting so much feedback. I mean, if we look at when this is happening, it's happening all the time, immediately, and at scale. So it's great if you can make the investment in a team and utilize technology to help you, but when you get massive feedback, that can be a real challenge, and you may need an extension of your team. So here's an example we can look at to get a feeling for what type of feedback you might expect. Let's say that you were just interested in monitoring 4 sites, let's say, Google, Yelp, Facebook, and TripAdvisor, and your brand had 50 locations, and on average, let's say they were getting, 1.5 to 2 reviews per location. That would be 6 reviews per location per month. So when you take those 6 reviews times the 50 locations times the 4 sites, that gives you 1,200 guest comments a month. That's a massive amount of feedback. So this is a challenge to be able to respond to your guests. So one of the questions is, are people doing it? So what we did is we had the opportunity to look at some data across the industry. We've collected data for all businesses in addition to the restaurant category. We also work with businesses and brands in other categories, and we've been monitoring this for quite some time. And when we looked at of businesses that have reviews, for all businesses, what percentage of those businesses are actually replying? And it used to be 2 or 3%, so now we're up to 21%, which is a huge trend. It's definitely increasing, and if you look at restaurants as a subcategory of all businesses, they're one of the most active at 28%. And then if you want to look at the percentage of reviews that they're actually replying to, that's even higher. For all businesses, it's 35% of the reviews, increase in reviews. And then for restaurants, it's increased even more, almost 60%. Now, if we look at the percentage of a particular restaurant category, say sandwiches, we see that the sandwich category is not replying as high as the restaurant category overall, with 16% of restaurant locations that have reviews replying. So what that really says is there's some smart people out there that recognize an opportunity to differentiate themselves, and they're taking it. And if you look at the number of reviews they're applying to even more than the entire industry with 68%. So we see some really great trends in the data, and folks like Firehouse taking advantage of that.
Well, and one of the things that's so important to that is, right now we're showing that 85% of customers say that they want to engage with a restaurant that is going to engage with them through their reviews. And right now, only 30% of the restaurants across the nation are engaging back with their guests online through these top sites.
So the question is, why are businesses replying? And the answer is that they're actually able to gain a lot more customers. They're getting more new and repeat customers. They're getting more reviews. They're getting more ratings. And all of this is leading to higher revenue. And that's ultimately the goal, is to satisfy your guests such that you attract more new guests and increase loyalty and have them engage with you and have that really permeate your market. There's a great Harvard business study. I think Fred can provide a link to all of you afterwards that they did in the restaurant category, and they found that a 1-star increase in your online reputation can lead to a 5 to 9% increase in sales. We've done this across many different brands. We found the increase in revenue anywhere from 3.7% up to 17%. So there's a dramatic correlation here. Chris, if you're still on there, if you could tell us a little bit about what your experience has been with 2Js.
No, absolutely. And so, as you can see on this slide, we know that customer engagement is of utmost importance. As a matter of fact, customer engagement really equates to the relationship we have with our guests. Build the relationship, you get high loyalty and satisfaction. High loyalty equals more frequency, as was just stated. At 2Js, we really maintain a culture of pride, which represents personal, respectful, inviting, delivering expectations, and engaging. So prior to our relationship and use of Merchant Centric, we were not meeting our standards online. And the key is taking and displaying ownership in what we do. As you see, with the use of technology, we've been able to enhance our practices. So prior to that, we had, customer info on the website, letters, emails that came to us, and we have a best practice of responding within 24 hours to our guests. Our ADs own the process, and within 48 hours, we want to resolve that issue, whatever that is, and communicate with the guests and bring closure. As I said, the AD, owns that. As online reviews continue to become more frequent and relevant, for example, in recent years, you would see, sporadic history on Yelp or the online reviews. Today, you look on these reviews, they're days old, sometimes hours old, and it become much more relevant. The technology through Merchant Centric has really allowed us to maintain our best practices in response, continue to maintain that ownership, and the key in timely response and getting a response to our guests, and acknowledging the time that they took to give us that valuable feedback. They've really become an extension of the team. So in terms of overall ratings, this has really made an impact. We've increased guest satisfaction. We've improved the overall ratings, guest satisfaction. We connect with our management and our guests, and the importance of this and the visibility that this gives to our guests. And it really has become an extension of our sort of marketing tools. So it all helps us be better equipped to guide and grow sales within the brand, and certainly has been well worth the investment in time and management, because here at 2Js we're relatively small company at 27 units. We all wear a lot of hats, and this has helped us leverage our resources to ensure that we respond to our guests in a timely fashion.
Chris, have you seen an increase in sales as a result of this?
You know, without a doubt, you know, there's no secret to anyone on this phone that, you know, casual dining has been a fight. And, you know, we subscribe to Black Box, and we have been pretty on top line, pretty much outperforming since we've engaged in this. So there's a lot of components that go into that, but there's no doubt that the visibility here has helped us maintain our sales levels.
Thanks, Chris, for sharing your experience. And you know, I think you're not alone. You're definitely leading a trend here for brands that have recognized, you know, historically the importance of the customer experience and really creating that connection in store and wanting to extend it beyond their store online. This is another slide we like to share with people, which is the revenue per location for a big brand, a multi-location quick service restaurant. The data is anonymized, but what you see on the y-axis is the revenue per location for one period. They were on a 13-period calendar. And so what you see on the bottom scale is, in the right side, high revenue locations. And you see that that's correlated with high ratings. On the Y scale, you have the social ratings across top websites for these same locations. And you have a 42% positive correlation between revenue and ratings. And that's really compelling, because that's what that's saying is that where you do a good job and make a lot of money, your guests are telling you you're doing a good job. And then in the lower left-hand quadrant, where you're not making as much money, your guests are telling you you're not doing a good job. So it's really important to understand your top-performing locations versus your bottom-performing locations, your revenue at risk locations where you may think you're doing well because of the revenue, but your guests are saying you're not. And if you don't address these issues, they're going to drop into bottom performers. And opportunity locations where you can drive increased revenue by listening to your guests. So in this slide, this is another example of the impact that ratings and listening to your guests have on new and returning customers. And we really like to provide a lot of data and proof because, you know, while it's intuitive for a lot of folks that listening to your customer is going to help you drive revenues, you know, a lot of folks want the proof is in the pudding and actually seeing the data. And, you know, we've been lucky to work with a lot of brands that have provided us with their transaction data. This was a brand that was able to discern between new and returning guests. And we did a study in a year-over-year same-store sales growth rates. And what we found is that for those locations that were above a certain hurdle rate in star rating, that they had over 3 times greater growth rate in new customers. So there was really nothing that could explain this really large growth in new customers relative to the other stores other than this social ratings difference. And it wasn't just in new guests. When they look at returning guests, and obviously they're usually typically a much larger portion of businesses' clientele, they had over twice the percentage of returning guests when they had higher social ratings. And what that indicates is that your customers are telling you you're doing a good job, and they're going to come back more often because you're doing a good job there. And so these are the same stores. Nothing else could really explain these differences.
Well, let's hear from Katie at Firehouse Subs what her support has been, because she's got a lot of locations here, and obviously that's talking about overwhelming numbers. You have 1,000 locations giving you feedback.
Yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. We currently have over 1,050 locations. We are in 44 states. Puerto Rico, Canada, most recently Mexico. We have a lot of things in common with 2J's. A couple of the points that Chris touched on are the same for us. We realized as a brand that we were really missing the mark a year ago when it came to review sites and not monitoring them. And we had all kinds of reviews out there that were just sitting unresponded to, some that could have been led to potential crisis. So we decided to make the investment, you know, join with Merchant Centric. Their team's done an awesome job for us. They went back in our historical data and helped clean up some of those reviews that were sitting out there. But like I mentioned earlier, we respond and review to all, or we respond and monitor all of our locations' reviews, and then anything 3-star below we respond to, because it's important for us as a brand that our guests get the same experience through a review that they would get if they walked into our restaurant and came up to the register and voiced, concern with their experience. We really base everything we do around our mission statement, which is our culture. And like I said, we want them to get that no matter if it's in the restaurant, on Facebook, on Yelp, it doesn't matter. And something that Adam touched on that's huge for us is we have actually had an increase in review activity since joining on with Merchant Centric. And I think a lot of that leads to, the fact that we are so responsive. We respond to every review that comes in on a daily basis. And then another thing is our star rating has increased, which in turn leads to more foot traffic and increased sales, which, as a brand, we can't ask for anything else. So it's been a huge thing, and we address it at the corporate level, but it trickles all the way down to the restaurant manager. So we make sure that everyone is engaged with what's going on at the restaurant. We've also found trends that are going on with the brand that we've been able to take action on through these reviews that we're receiving.
Yeah, Katie, I think it's fascinating that you've been getting more people and more engagement without you having to push the fact that they should get online. So it sounds like just that interaction with people, it's sort of becoming a bit of a magnet and compelling people to go. And that's fantastic. Absolutely. And I think on the next slide, we're going to be able to look a little bit about how these ratings drive results. Katie mentioned that her ratings have gone up, and what we've seen is a direct correlation between higher ratings and then also just getting better sales. And that's an important thing to know for the people on the call who are trying to figure out, how does social media work to my benefit?
Yeah, Fred, I'd also like to ask Katie, in terms of reporting, you've got such a large organization. How is the information shared across your management team?
So we have daily reports that are sent out to our executive team and our franchise business managers, as well as my department, on a daily basis, and that captures all the reviews that we receive on a day-to-day basis. So that way everyone has eyes on what's going on. And then we also, whenever we receive reviews, we send that to the franchisee, their area representative, and then they share that to the lower levels in the restaurant. So we really make sure that everyone gets eyes on what's going on as a brand on a day-to-day basis. It's key for us to be on top of it and make sure that everyone's made aware, so that way we can take action immediately.
Well, let me ask you, anyone can really answer it, but is there value in responding to positive reviews? We had a question from the audience.
Well, Fred, that is a great question, and we're actually responding on behalf of lots of brands. One of the exercises that we do is we do something called the capture the voice of the brand, so we make sure that when we are working with them and their guests, that they have the true feeling of that brand. And our best practice we've seen is it can be very helpful to acknowledge positive responses as well. When someone says something nice about you and you acknowledge them, that encourages them even more and can encourage even more positive results. It really depends on the volume that you're getting and your ability to do that. As Katie mentioned, they are seeing such a increase. I think they've had a dramatic increase in the number of responses, and it's obviously because they're engaging with them, and they're seeing more 4- and 5-star results. So if you can, it's nice to be able to acknowledge those folks as well. It does encourage even more of those.
Well, good. So let's take a look now at this slide in terms of what it shows us in terms of how top performers and bottom performers get reviewed and rated. So Adam, can you make some comments on that?
Sure, Fred. So this relates to the next step in kind of the online guest engagement solution set, which is applying data analytics. What we've talked about so far has really been monitoring and engagement, and then taking that engagement, as both Chris and Katie mentioned, and connecting your front line with what your guests are saying, and doing it with a star rating and specific feedback and reviews is very useful because they can hear what your guests are saying. Another important thing is if you can actually drill down when you have such a massive feedback and understand the themes overall that are affecting your brand. So this is an example of being able to actually count within the unstructured content specific themes. And this is where we might look at, what's the count of the number of negative comments with regard to slow service or inaccurate orders, or with surroundings, the comments relating to noisiness, or with product portion size. And what you can do in this type of data analytics analysis is determine what is the optimal level that you can get negative comments? Because, you know, we all like to complain. You know, I'm a very good complainer. You can ask my wife. What you have to figure out is what's the acceptable level of complaints before she hits me in the ribs. And your top performers have actually found that acceptable level. That's the amount of complaints you can get and still get high ratings and high revenues. And so what you want to do is index that level against your bottom performers in other locations. And in this particular analysis we did for a brand, you can see the areas where their other locations or bottom performers were out of alignment with their top performers was with speed of service, the noisiness of the surroundings, and all of that was impacting their price value, with guests saying that they would not return. So it's important to dig through all of the guest feedback to discern what's meaningful, not necessarily what's noisiest. And that can be a real challenge, but is where you can find the hidden value in your guest feedback.
That's fantastic. So let's take a look at just how we can try and predict sales growth, looking at the star rating and see how that works.
Well, once you know what it is that you need to focus on, you can develop a strategy and you can implement that strategy. And as we mentioned before, you know, you're able, once you look at the specific correlation between your ratings and revenues, to be able to determine if you fix these things, what impact that will have on your sales. And it's not just a matter of trying to get more reviews, it's actually making operational changes to the things that your guests are telling you are most important. When you do that, you're actually going to drive your ratings and you're going to drive revenues. And we've been able to work with brands and share with them if they can make a 30 basis point or 50 basis point increase in their overall ratings, the impact that can have and predict the growth in sales. And it's been very significant in the millions to tens of millions across large enterprises.
So for the attendees on this webinar, and I think this is probably the biggest gem out of this whole thing, is that through proper social media monitoring, you'll be able to know exactly what your guests are upset about and fix it. So many times we're looking at competition or external things that we can't control, and then we say, well, maybe more advertising will help us do it, when in fact, by just having a method by which you can capture all the data from disparate sources from your guests, all their feedback, where they're saying, hey, the food is not tasty, the service is slow, the restrooms are dirty, the place is noisy, you'll be able to fix those things directly, because not only just can you see this on a massive scale, like Katie's got over 1,000 locations, so she can look at her trend over across the entire system. Chris has less restaurants, but likewise, he wants to know the very specific location where it can be fixed. And maybe I'll ask Chris and Katie if you have any anecdotal stories to share where you've been able to identify a problem, fix it, and see a change in performance.
Yeah, I'll go first. So for us, we see a bunch. I mean, we get so much feedback, but we have been able to narrow it down and hone in on certain locations. We have to look at our bottom percent, and we look at the things that their guests are saying the most about them, and what's causing them to be in that bottom 10%. You know, oftentimes it's going to be speed of service. So we actually, as a brand, decided this is an issue. Our guests expect to come in on a 30-minute lunch and be able to get their food quickly and still have time to eat and get back to work on time. So we're rolling out a new back office system for our operators to use that actually provides a labor scheduler for them to help with these labor issues to then correct the speed of service. So it really, I mean, it really helps. If you don't know it's broken, you can't fix it, but now we have the ability to know and to fix it.
Great. Chris, what about you?
Very similarly, it really helped us identify exactly where to sort of point our focus. So we were challenged by, we were getting great ratings on food, but we were identifying that we were struggling on in this one restaurant in particular on slow service and even some surliness feedback that we had gotten through the online review system. So we were able to really be able to point the focus on how to manage guest feedback in the four walls and be able to, you know, make sure that we get to those guests and put the focus on not only being more efficient, but when an issue happens in the restaurant, create a criteria or create strategies to ensure that we're resolving it in-house. And we were able to see very immediate improvement, because those are the types of things that you put some training behind and you're able to fix, and this really helped us, narrow that focus.
Chris, do you send people gift cards or refund when they have a negative review? How do you handle negative comments? I know there's engagement and replying, but what else is done for the guest?
It really depends. So the in general, absolutely, we will send a gift card in appreciation of their feedback, and that dollar amount would vary depending on how disruptive their issue was. And the one thing I will say is timely feedback is absolutely important. The longer you wait, the more it ends up costing you in repair. But our philosophy is, period, solve the problem, period. Make the guests feel, acknowledged. And so the response, as you said, is quite important. And to complement that, we give an appropriate token of our appreciation, and whether it be a $25 bounce back or a $50 bounce back, but something appropriate that matches up with our check average or what they spent in the restaurant.
That's great. And Connie, you had a comment to make?
Yes, I wanted to touch on an important point that you made about people doing print media and thinking that they need to do some more advertising out there to generate sales. And one of the things that we're seeing is that if you haven't put first things first, which is your online reputation by improving your overall star rating, engaging with your guest, we don't really recommend that you go out and spend all this money for ad and radio and TV campaigns only to direct them to your online listings and see that you're not even engaging with your guest or you have a low star rating. That will help them to choose a competitor over you. So we say, take a look at your online listings, see if you're engaging with your guest, improve that overall star rating so that when they do find you, they like what they see and they choose you over the competition. And in fact, Nielsen ratings have proven that there's a 2 to a 7% ROI on your ad campaigns when you put first things first by taking care of your online guest reputation across the top sites.
So you get a real multiple on your...
No, that's great feedback. There's the old axiom that someone said that I know that half my advertising doesn't work, but I just don't know which half. And in this case, you have very specific actions you can take because it's very immediate. It's coming right from the person you're trying to most please. Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to reiterate that you can actually leverage your ad spend. Your ad spend will be more effective when your reputation is better. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Good. Well, that segues perfectly to sort of recap some of the things we discussed in terms of how restaurants drive sales and then what the results are. So, Adam, if you can make some quick summary comments and see if there's any more questions.
Absolutely. So just to recap, these are some of the actions that we see restaurant brands taking. Initially, a lot of them will start with just reputation monitoring, where they're going to listen and observe what their customers are saying. The next step is to actually engage. This is addressing and really looking at all your reviews. You may not reply to all of them. I mean, sometimes there's just a star rating and nothing to say. You may like them on Facebook, but you want to engage and be aware of it and identify the trends. Identifying the trends is an important part of data analytics. You want to correlate, what those trends are saying in mass about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and understand that. And from that, you want to strategize and implement the actions that are going to serve your guests, as both Katie and Chris gave some examples of taking action and the impact, and being able to have a system where you have reporting and email reports that you can share with your managers so they can see the benefit. There's nothing better than reinforcing the positive effects of taking an action, like seeing your ratings go up.
Well, that's great. And, of course, the proof's in the pudding, so the results that we get, and these are the things that really ends up happening, as has been said. You get more new repeat guests that are more engaged with your brand. They have more loyalty to you. I thought what Katie said was fantastic. More reviews. People seem to get, their friends involved. Higher ratings lead to increased sales, and of course, ultimately increased profits. And that's really what we're trying. That's really what we're trying to achieve. And so I think what we have next is our guest management checklist to let us see what it is that we have to do. Adam?
So this is just some questions you may want to ask about your brand and understand and answer for yourself to give you some idea of where you are, what you may want to focus on. you know, a really initial question is, do you even know the number of guests that are reviewing your brand per month? Do you have an idea of the volume of that feedback? And, you know, some brands have said, oh, well, it's really low, so it's not important. And then we ask them, well, what's the volume of your competitors? And they never thought to look at that. And then they'll often see that their competitor volume can be 4, 5, 6 times. And then they get a clue, wow, this is really important, because those are the ones that are actually doing quite well, and that they see in different rating and ranking and benchmarking that those are brands that are actually getting sales growth and maintaining it even in these tough times. So that's the first thing is, you know, I would ask myself, do you know how many people per month are doing it, are reviewing us? The next thing is, what are they saying, and how do you compare to the local competitors? Then you want to know, do you actually have control? Do you have the credentials for all your locations and all their listings on top sites? This is important to be able to control your brand information for accuracy, making sure you have the right hours, a strategy for how you're going to, you know, build your brand online, optimize your brand. And this will also ensure that if you do have a crisis, that you have the means to engage and ameliorate it, and making sure, do you have a plan of action in the event of a crisis? Then you want to decide, you know, what is our strategy? You know, some people will reply only to a fraction of their guests. Some people will reply to all their guests. How do you want to reply? Some people will reply with incentives. Some people have different strategies for how they want to reply. Are you going to only reply to complaints versus compliments? And then making sure that you have an escalation plan. You know, we provide some of these services, and it's been really crucial and a huge criteria for the brands to be able to identify whenever there's a threatened legal action, when there's mention of food poisoning, when there are potential HR issues. How does all of that get escalated? Brands that are ignoring this are doing it at their own risk and peril. So you definitely want to have an escalation plan to be able to understand what your guests are saying, and the right people. Understand keeping your GMs, your area managers informed about what your guests are saying. So making sure that you have reporting that reaches the front lines, and then being able to measure your progress over time. It's one thing to say, oh, we got a 4.4 rating this month across all our locations, and then versus last month. But how is that trend going overall? And understanding your monthly trend versus your history versus your competitors. This is all crucial sort of data analytics and reporting that's going to help you compete in this new frontier that we're at.
That's great. And we're looking for all of you. If you have any questions, well, feel free to ask them now before we do wrap up. But just as a reminder, we will be sending everyone a copy of this webinar. You'll get a link in a few days, so you'll be able to play it back for anyone you want to share this with. And also, just be aware that on the Results Through Strategy website, we do have some of our past webinars up there. We always post them up there for eternity and posterity, covering many different topics that may be of interest in how you run your business. And so we're just, as I see right now, we don't seem to have any more questions. So what I'd like to do is to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much for the great job you've done. Adam and Connie from Merchant Centric, you're doing some really wonderful things. And then, of course, we're really, really grateful to have the participation from two great restaurateurs who are really working with all this and trying to make it work. So Katie and Chris, thank you so much for being so willing to be open and honest with how you're managing this process and growing sales through social media. And for the attendees, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.